Hey there, it's Laura Dominic. Thanks for joining me on a Plan for Joy podcast. Each week we'll be talking about things that will help you break the cycle of depletion. You know, the one that has you going from doing all the things to feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, resentment, anger, to sucking it up and starting all over again. And instead, learn to break the cycle and contribute from a place of abundance. Are you ready? Good. Let's go. Hello there, and welcome to what is really the third part of a two-part series of podcasts. Episode 1, our first episode, introduced you to me in my younger years. Episode 2 introduced you to me as a wife and a mother and my important reversion process back to the faith and how I learned a really important lesson that took me years to learn. So if you missed those two episodes, I'd recommend going back and listening to those first. So in episode 3 here, we're going to talk more about transitions. So as you have probably experienced in your life, transitions can be very difficult, even if they're the kind of transitions that you want to have. They require us to be flexible. They require us to completely trust in God because He knows what's going to happen next, but we don't know what's going to happen next. And sometimes that can make these transitions very difficult. We need to feel the emotions of the transition. It's just that we can't get stuck there. And I think that's the key difference is sometimes we get stuck too long in the emotions of the transition, especially if it's something we didn't choose. I like to use Hal Elrod's 5-minute rule because it's like, okay, you need to feel emotions. This isn't about skipping past them and ignoring them and just pushing on being positive. No, it's not about that at all. We need to feel them, but sometimes they're only worthy of, 5 minutes of our time. So Hal says, set a timer for 5 minutes and then just fully feel the emotions for those 5 minutes. And then when the timer goes off, you're done. You're going to move forward and do something different. And so he said he noticed that after a while, he'd set the timer for 5 minutes and he'd get really angry and punch things and do all this stuff. And then he'd be like looking at the timer and only 2 minutes had gone by. And he's like, well, now what do I do for the next 3 minutes? And so after a while, he realized he didn't even need the 5 minutes. So for emotions like that, where you can they overwhelm you, feel them for that 5 minutes, and then afterwards make a conscious choice to just move forward into something different. Because, you know it, I know it sometimes, those emotions can go on for a really long time. And we need to, like I said, just make sure we're not getting stuck in a bad place. And then again, that's what, therapy can be beneficial for, to get you unstuck from those emotions. And then when we're in times of transitions, we need to be able to make decisions because that's what a transition is. You have to change from one thing to another thing. If you're moving, if you're having a baby, if you're starting a new job or a new school or somebody dies, something happens in your life, like a bankruptcy, and it's not really your choice, but you have to make decisions like, what am I supposed to do next? But the important thing is to also realize that we can't get paralyzed in the decision-making process either. Decision-making is a skill. It's a skill that you need to learn how to do efficiently and effectively. And realize, the key thing I think about decision-making is that you're going to make the wrong decision sometimes. And that's okay. In fact, sometimes that leads you to the next right step, is that you had to make that wrong decision. And so we need to be humble enough to know that when we've chosen a path, we're going to make that decision and go forward. And then it ends up being a bad decision or the wrong decision, or it doesn't work out the way we wanted it to. We have to be humble enough to pivot, look at what we've been through and extract the lessons from that failure. It's called failing forward fast. And that's what transitional times are all about, is learning how to make those decisions and keep going, pivot when you need to, and extract the lessons from those supposed failures. Failure, that's all failure is just a lesson, something you need to learn from. So a lot of times I'll say, okay, well, here's the transition in front of me. What is the one next right step that I can take? I don't need to see the whole path. I don't need to know all the different actions that are going to happen because I probably won't have figured it out the right way anyhow. I just need to take the next right step. So that's what I was faced with when I realized, well, I mean, I always realize it, but when it came to the point where my youngest son will be done homeschooling in June of 2023. And that, I've mentioned it here before, will wrap up 25 years of being a homeschooling mom. So that's my identity. I am the mother of a large family, and I am a homeschooling mom, and that's what I've done for 25 years. I remember when my kids were younger and, you know, you get to that age where you can, you know, one of them's old enough that you can finally leave them home and like go out without all your kids trailing behind you. And I remember how people didn't really recognize me because and I've had people tell me that, oh, I didn't recognize you without all those kids around you. And so that's how you kind of feel like, okay, those kids are my identity. I'm not a person unless my kids are with me. So that was a weird time to transition into meeting people without my children around. And now it's even more strange, I think, because my kids are all young adults. And so very frequently I'm out by myself. So now it's like, well, who am I? Right? I don't have any kids around me. A lot of times, like I'll be at church and I'll see large families, a lot of kids, a lot of little kids. And I think, you know, yeah, that used to be me. And people will say something to them about little kid, having all those little kids, how you doing it and all that stuff. And I'm like, but I had that many too. You know, it's a weird how you fall back into that time in that identity. So I've thought about that. Like, okay, who am I? How do I introduce myself even? You know, you meet somebody new. Hi, I'm Laura. I have a bunch of kids and I used to homeschool. That seems a little odd. I thought, okay, how about, hi, I'm Laura and I'm in transition right now. Could be a good opener for a conversation, but I'm choosing to not live in the past. I'm choosing to look into the future for who I am. So probably more like, hi, I'm Laura. I'm learning to lean into this new and exciting time in my life, the time that's coming up ahead. Because really, any transition is all about our attitude. I mean, our mind is so powerful. We have something called the reticular activating system, which I find fascinating. And what it does is it matches our thoughts with our reality. Dana Wilde describes it as the matchmaker in our brain. So if you're dreading a transition, which is natural sometimes. Let's say we're going into this transition feeling useless because I'm no longer doing anything like homeschooling and raising children and all that. And so my reticular activating system is like, yeah, okay, let me show you things that match with your feeling of being useless. But if I instead look forward with positive expectation to what the future holds, guess what? My RAS is going to pull up things to match that positive expectation. I will notice more opportunities. I will see more creative ideas. My mind will be much more open because I'm looking forward with expectation instead of looking back and kind of feeling dread about what's coming forward. And believe me when I say this, I did not used to have this perspective. I had to learn this. Again, your mindset, changing your mindset, learning to think positively is a skill. And it's one that I had never learned before. So I had to learn to look at things optimistically. I think there's an element of grace involved, for sure. But I used to be what I called a realist. My husband would always be like, no, you're not a realist. You're just a pessimist in disguise. And for years I would fight him on that. And I learned he was right. A realist is just essentially a pessimist in disguise. So I knew that I needed to change that outlook going forward if I wanted to have my future be good, happy, and not be just missing what I had left behind. I knew I needed things to change or I was going to slide into my retirement in a pretty bad way. I had a pivotal moment. It was pivotal for a lot of us when in 2021, my sister-in-law died suddenly. And you know how there's certain members of the family, the extended family, that are just kind of like key members. They kind of hold things all together. Well, she was that person. And so it was very traumatic for the whole family. And that event kind of like shook me awake, because I started thinking, like you do most times when things like that happen, how much time do I really have left? And am I going to just spend it in dread and negativity? So I got off my butt at that time, and I had come across a coaching program from the women's school, and it was a master class that I had looked into previously, but I just had decided, no, I don't want to do that. I don't have time. I don't have money. But after her death, it kind of, like I said, shook me up. So I went, and even though I really didn't know what this whole coaching thing was about, what the master class was about, and I didn't have the money for it, I'll tell you that much, I went ahead and signed up anyhow, because I felt like if I don't do something drastic, then I'm going to regret it. And I can tell you now, a year and a half later, that was probably one of the best decisions I have ever made for myself. I learned so much about how powerful your mind is and how you can learn to shape it, to see things differently. I learned how to change my mindset. I learned how to be an optimist, like really be an optimist. I had never experienced that before in all of my years. I learned how to make decisions. I learned how to be resilient, which was like I was anti-resilient. You put me up against a wall like that and I'd be like, all right, I'm done. 30 seconds even. I'm done. I'm not going to do that. Didn't work out. It was too hard. So I knew that was one thing I had to work on. And it's a skill. So it's teachable. It's learnable. And I learned how to fail forward fast, like I had said before. Maybe I don't fail forward super fast, but I'm faster than I used to be. And I think the biggest change that if there was one thing I had to extract from that whole 6-month class, was I learned about boundaries. I learned about what they are, because I had no clue what a boundary was. I learned how to set them. I learned how to communicate them. I learned how incredibly important they were to having a happy life. So we're definitely going to spend more time on boundaries in the future, because they're so pivotal. And I realized that I am just a much more excited and motivated and happier person, because I was at a precipice. I was in this transition time, and I know it could have gone either way. And I know a lot of times it's difficult for people to change what they need to change when they're in that time of transition, and how hard it is. And so that's why I'm here in this podcast, to help you realize that you can change your mindset. You can improve your mindset. You can learn new skills. In fact, there's probably new skills you need to learn. You can learn how to meet new people. Or we're going to discuss things that are depleting you and how to get out of that cycle of depletion that I talk about in my book, When Good Isn't Good Enough. And help you to realize that you need to take the time to fill your cup so that you can give freely and happily to others, because you can't give what you don't have. You were created to contribute. That's why you're here. You need to contribute to others. You need to do that from a place of willingness and abundance, though, and not from a feeling of depletion. You need to want to give to others from a place of joy and, out of love. And that is so different than constantly giving of yourself from out of a feeling of obligation, resentment, frustration. That's the kind of thing that needs to stop. And I detail how I went through years of that cycle of depletion, of feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and resentful and angry and blowing up and sucking it up and starting all over again. I talk about that in my book. I'll leave a link to the Amazon link where you can purchase that. I highly recommend it for every woman. I learned that that's not a fun place to be. And I never knew how to get out of that cycle. And so that's kind of what we're here to talk about, is how to do that. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. God wants you to love others as you love yourself. If you do not love yourself, it's really hard to love other people the way you're supposed to. He doesn't want you to feel depleted. He wants to give you an abundant life, not one that you groan about or wish you could hide from because you're so overwhelmed. So I hope you'll continue to listen in the podcast, share it with others, join in. If you have something you want to talk about, I'd love to talk to you. If there's something you want to hear about, let me know. I would love to discuss it further here. I'm here to help you to stop being so stressed out and dreading life, because I lived there for far too long. I know what it feels like. And everybody's going to have those moments. I'm not just going to say that so you have your plan for joy and you're never going to feel stressed or depleted again. No, that's not reality. But I have the tools now to know how to flip it around pretty quick. What we need to do is be excited to give our time, our talent, and our treasure to others, because we love God and we love our life and we love being able to contribute. So join me again next week for the next episode of A Plan for Joy podcast, where we'll be talking about gratitude. Have a good week and God bless.